All right, so welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be stepping away from like our usual data-driven investigations.
Huh?
Expert speaker. Yeah, we're going to explore something a little different, a bit more
Oh, shit.
personal.
Interesting.
We're diving into a personal story, um, a narrative that kind of touches on those universal themes of companionship and loss,
Oh, wow.
and maybe, just maybe, even a brush with the unexplained.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Like, even in our modern scientific world, there's still room for, those experiences that just defy easy explanation,
For sure.
and how those experiences can really shape our beliefs, like our understanding of the world around us.
Absolutely. And the story we're going to be exploring today, it revolves around this woman, Lara. And by all accounts, she lived a pretty solitary life. Her constant companion, her anchor, was her dog, Max.
Oh.
He was more than just a pet to her, he was family.
Yeah, that deep bond between humans and animals, especially dogs.
Yeah.
That's something that's been studied a lot. And it's not just about companionship. Dogs can provide a sense of purpose, emotional support, or a reason to get up in the morning,
Okay.
especially for people who might be, feeling isolated or lonely.
Absolutely. So picture this, okay. Crisp winter afternoon. Laura and Max are taking their daily walk in the park. It's their routine, their little slice of normalcy. But then Max, being a dog, spots something intriguing in the distance and bolts off chasing after it, disappears into the trees.
Oh, no.
I know, right? You can almost feel that immediate surge of adrenaline, right?
Wow.
That fear that just grips Laura as she realizes, oh my God, Max is gone.
Yeah.
In that moment, all those rational thoughts, they probably just fly out the window. It's pure
Mm.
instinct. It's a primal fear of losing something precious.
Totally, totally. And as darkness starts to creep in, the park, once so familiar, takes on an almost menacing feel. That fear just turns into, like, chilling despair.
Oh, I hate that. Laura's frantically calling Max's name. She's searching every nook and cranny, but there's no sign of him.
It's interesting how our perception of a place can shift, so dramatically based on our emotional state. A park that was once a source of comfort, joy, can suddenly become this place of anxiety and fear,
Right.
all because of a perceived threat.
It's like our senses are heightened,
Yeah.
right? Every rustle of leaves, every shadow seems to whisper like a warning. And in Laura's case, that sense of unease only grows when, just as she's about to give up hope, a voice cuts through the silence.
Oh.
Yeah.
And this is where the story takes a truly intriguing turn. A young man appears, seemingly out of nowhere.
That's
He
crazy.
has this calm, almost serene demeanor, a knowing smile, and something about him just radiates this sense of peace.
Really?
It's almost like he's not quite of this world.
It's like he just materializes from the shadows.
Yeah.
And instead of feeling threatened, Laura is immediately drawn to him. He assures her that he knows where Max is. And without a second thought, she just follows him,
No.
trusting this complete stranger, implicitly.
Now, from a psychological perspective, this is where we start to kind of delve into the complexities of perception
Yeah.
and how it can be influenced by, our emotional state. When we're under extreme stress, our brains tend to seek patterns to like fill in the gaps, even if it means creating a narrative that might not be entirely accurate.
So you're saying that Lara's desperation to find Max, combined with the sudden appearance of this calming figure, might have, skewed her perception of the situation.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. Our minds are constantly trying to make sense of the world around us.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially in moments of crisis, that process can lead to misinterpretations or even hallucinations.
So this young man, this beacon of hope in the midst of her despair, could have been a figment of her imagination, a projection of her desperate need for help.
Yeah, it's something to consider, absolutely.
Wow.
But let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Okay.
Let's follow Laura and the young man as they venture deeper into the park, down a path she swears she's never seen before.
And it's down this path that the atmosphere takes on an even more, like, unsettling quality. The trees seem to close in around them, the shadows lengthen, and there's this almost palpable feeling of being watched.
This journey through the unfamiliar, it's like entering a liminal space, a threshold between the known and the unknown.
I see.
It's in these spaces that our senses are heightened, our imaginations run wild, and we become more susceptible to suggestion.
Like stepping into a fairy tale, right? Where the boundaries between reality and fantasy start to blur.
Exactly.
And just when that sense of unease reaches like its peak, they emerge into a clearing and there's Max.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine, wagging his tail as if nothing has happened.
Wow. The relief Laura must have felt in that moment, it's almost palpable. But that relief is quickly followed by another twist.
What?
She turns to thank the young man who led her to Max. But he's vanished, gone without a trace, as if he were never there at all. It's like something out of a ghost story, isn't it? And it leaves us, and Lara, grappling with a whole new set of questions. Was this young man a real person? Or was he something else entirely?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's a question that takes us beyond the realm of pure psychology and into the realm of belief, of faith, and of those experiences that just defy easy explanation.
And that's exactly what we're going to explore further in part 2 of this deep dive.
So we're left with this unsettling image, like this helpful stranger just vanishing into thin air. It's the kind of event that just makes you, like, question everything you thought you knew about the world.
It definitely sends chills down your spine.
Yeah.
And for Lara, this experience, it wasn't just like a spooky story to tell at parties. It had a profound impact, like, on her beliefs. She became convinced that she'd encountered an angel, a divine being sent to help her in her, time of need.
And that's where the sociological aspect of his deep dive, comes in. Throughout history, across cultures, people have attributed these unexplained events to supernatural forces.
Right.
And these beliefs offer comfort, a sense of order in a chaotic world, and often a framework for coping with, loss or hardship.
But couldn't we argue that Lara's belief in angels was just a way to kind of rationalize a situation that was just too difficult to process, logically?
That's certainly a valid perspective. Cognitive dissonance theory suggests that when we're faced with these conflicting beliefs or experiences, we tend to seek explanations that maintain, our existing worldview. So for Lara, believing in angels might have resolved the dissonance between her rational understanding of the world and this extraordinary event.
So it's not necessarily about whether angels actually exist, but about how this belief served a psychological function for Lara.
Precisely. It provided a narrative that made sense to her, a way to integrate this experience into her understanding of reality. And it's important to remember that the human mind is incredibly powerful. What we believe can profoundly influence how we perceive and, interact with the world.
It's like those optical illusions where you see one thing, then another, like, depending on your perspective. Could Lara's pre-existing belief in angels have acted as a kind of filter, like shaping how she interpreted the events that night?
That's a fascinating analogy, and it touches on the concept of confirmation bias, where we tend to favor information that confirms, our existing beliefs and dismiss evidence that contradicts them. So in Lara's case, her belief in angels might have made her more likely to interpret the young man's, appearance and disappearance as a supernatural event.
And this brings up another intriguing point. If Lara hadn't had this belief in angels, would she have experienced the events in the park the same way? Would she have even noticed the young man, let alone followed him into the woods?
That's a question we can't answer definitively, of course,
Yeah.
but it highlights this complex interplay between perception, belief, and experience. What we believe shapes what we see, and what we see reinforces what we believe. It's like, a continuous feedback loop.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we perceive as reality is actually shaped by our beliefs, our expectations, even our cultural conditioning, and how much remains truly objective?
That's a fundamental question that philosophers and scientists have been grappling with for centuries. And there's no easy answer. But I think what's important here is not to dismiss Lara's experience as simply delusional or, fabricated.
So we're not saying she made the whole thing up.
Not at all. Remember, she was under immense stress, Her beloved companion was missing, and she was alone in a darkening park. Her senses were heightened. Her emotions were, running high. It's entirely possible that her perception of events was altered by those factors.
It's like when you're walking alone at night and every shadow just looks like a potential threat.
Right.
Our brains are wired to kind of err on the side of caution, to fill in the gaps with whatever information is available, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Exactly. And in Lara's case, that missing information, might have been filled in by her belief system, by her faith in a higher power. It's not about proving or disproving the existence of angels, but about understanding the role of belief in shaping our individual realities.
So even if we strip away the supernatural element, there's still a compelling, like, psychological and sociological story to be told here. A story about how our minds cope with stress, how our beliefs shape our perceptions, and how even the most ordinary events can take on, like, extraordinary meaning when viewed through the lens of faith.
And I think that's a valuable takeaway for all of us, isn't it? To be aware of the filters that we use to interpret the world, to acknowledge the power of belief, and to, be open to the possibility that there might be more to reality than meets the eye.
Okay, so we've explored like the psychological and sociological angles of Lara's story. But there's another layer to this deep dive that I think is worth exploring the personal.
And by that you mean?
Well, we've been talking about Lara's experience from, a somewhat detached analytical perspective. But what about the emotional impact? How did this encounter, regardless of whether it was real or imagined, change her life?
That's an excellent point. We can't lose sight of, the human element here. For Lara, this wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was a profound emotional experience. And those kinds of experiences, they can have a lasting impact on who we are and how we view the world.
Let's delve into that in part 3. So we've been kind of unpacking Lara's story from, all these different angles, the psychology of perception, the sociology of belief. We even dipped a little bit into philosophy.
We did.
But what strikes me is that, for Lara, this wasn't like an abstract debate. This was her life.
It's so easy to get caught up in the analysis. But you're absolutely right. At the heart of this is a woman who, went through something really emotional. And whether we interpret it as, supernatural or psychological, the impact on her was very real.
Exactly. We know that Lara was already a believer in angels before this happened, but after the incident in the park, her faith became unshakable. It wasn't just a matter of intellectual assent anymore, it was something she felt deep down.
And that's where the power of personal experience comes in. We can talk about theories and concepts all day long, but sometimes a single lived experience can have a much more profound effect on our beliefs than 1,000 arguments.
It's like the difference between reading about love and actually falling in love. It's one thing to understand the concept, but it's another thing entirely to feel it, to have it transform you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And in Lara's case, this experience, this encounter with the unexplained, seems to have brought her a profound sense of peace, a feeling of connection to something, larger than herself.
We talked before about how belief can provide a framework for understanding the world, especially in the face of chaos or uncertainty. And it seems like that's exactly what happened for Lara.
Yeah.
Her faith gave her a way to make sense of this strange, unsettling experience and find meaning in it.
And it's not just about finding meaning, it's about finding solace. Think about what Lara went through. The fear, the desperation, the sense of isolation in that darkening park. Then the sudden appearance of this, calming figure, the reassurance that everything would be okay, and the a miraculous reunion with Max. It's almost like a classic archetype, a story that's been told and retold throughout human history.
The lost soul finding guidance and comfort from a benevolent force. It taps into something very deep within us, doesn't it? That longing for connection, for reassurance that we're not alone in the universe.
Absolutely. And whether we attribute that force to a supernatural being or, a psychological projection or simply the resilience of the human spirit, the effect can be the same, a sense of hope, a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that even in our darkest moments, there's something out there looking out for us.
So where does this leave us? We've explored a fascinating story, delved into the psychological and sociological factors that might have been at play, and we've touched on some pretty profound questions about belief, perception, and the nature of reality.
And I think what's most intriguing is that we haven't really arrived at a definitive answer. We can't say for sure whether Lara encountered, a real angel or whether her mind under duress created this experience. And maybe that's okay.
Maybe the mystery is part of what makes it so compelling. It challenges us to think beyond our usual frameworks, to acknowledge the limits of our understanding and to remain open to the possibility that there's more to the world than we can fully grasp.
Exactly. And it invites us to kind of reflect on our own beliefs, our own experiences, and the ways in which we make sense of the world around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a question to ponder. If you were in Lara's shoes, what would you believe? Would you embrace the possibility of the miraculous, or would you seek, a more rational explanation?
There's no right or wrong answer, but the very act of asking the question, of engaging with the mystery, can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the unexplained. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind to the wonders that might be just around the corner.